Here we're going to talk about how to prep a vise for use on a machine. So before you go to the machine, you're going to need to go over to the vise caddy I have and grab a vise. We have 3 shelves of vise here. There's different types of vices. We're going to go over some of the different subtle differences here. They're similar enough. There's no huge learning curve. But you're going to grab a vise. You're going to grab 2 vise jaws, which are located on the side over here. You never use a vise without vise jaws. Vise jaws are consumable. I don't know if you can tell, but we've been consuming these very well. Being at tech college, we tend to be rough on our equipment. So grab 2 vise jaws, and you're going to need 4 socket head cap screws, 2 for each vise jaw. They have counter bores in the vise jaws to house the bolts. Next, you're going to need hardware for holding the vise down to the table. So the table has T-slots, so we're going to be using T-nuts to go in the T-slots. The thread in these is 1/2-13. Now here we use bolts. We use grade 5 hex bolts to hold the vices down instead of using studs. That's to save my table and keep the studs from bottoming out in the table. So grab 2 hex bolts, 1/2-13 hex bolts. The length of the hex bolts are going to be determined by which vise you grabbed. So on some of these vices, the ears here are a bit taller. That's where the bolt's going to go. And on some of them you need a longer bolt to get through that ear. Most of them are of this style. We're a little lower and they're open on the end. And on that one we use 1 3/4 length bolts. This one here we need 2-inch bolts to get through it. So I have 2 different lengths of bolts in the cabinet here to tell you depending on which vise you're grabbing. And then you're going to grab 2 of these vise washers. Now these vise washers have a hole that'll fit the 1/2-inch bolt, but they are 1/8 of an inch thick. Do not grab washers out of the hardware box that are just standard washers. They will not withstand the forces that are going to be applied. You must use these thick reinforced washers that we've made here in house. Okay, so you got your hardware. Next, and you have your vise. Now I'm going to let's set this vise aside. Notice we put the vices on the rack on their sides. That's for a couple reasons. I don't have a very good surface here to protect the bottoms of the vices. And so to protect this ground surface on the vise, we lay them on their side. And for an ancillary benefit is all the stuff that you forgot to clean out of it typically drains out and makes a nice puddle on there that you can clean up later. Okay, so we have our vise, we have our hardware. Couple tools you're going to need. You're going to need a 3/8 hex, and you're going to need a 3/4-inch wrench to tighten these down. And you're going to need a torque wrench with a 3/4-inch socket in it. I don't know where my wrench is. I do not have a wrench on me. In a pinch you can use the vise handle. That is also 3/4. So that guy's doing double duty for us today. So we take our stone and we stone the bottom. You need to be listening. You're listening and feeling. It's a very, you're inspecting the bottom with the stone is what you're primarily doing there. And I didn't hear anything, feel anything. Making sure it's clean. If it is full of gunk and grease, grab yourself some WD-40 and go ahead and spray some WD-40 on there and clean off all of the bits. WD-40 is our general purpose lubricant and solvent in the shop, so I don't have to carry a bunch of different products. WD-40 is our go-to solvent and cleaner. Okay, so the bottom is done. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean and inspect the top. So I opened the jaws all the way up just to gain the access. You can see how this moves the jaws. So I backed them all the way out just so I can gain access to the vise ways. Now these do have some dried stuff on them, so I'm going to put some solvent on them, clean off the oil and whatever residue there. Now I need to inspect all the surfaces with the stone before I use them. So the vise ways, I didn't feel anything, I didn't hear anything, that's good. Next we're going to go on to the two surfaces in which our vise jaws are going to mount. Didn't feel anything, didn't hear anything. Clean all that off. Next, the vise jaws that we get from the manufacturer, the holes are not centered. They're closer to one side than the other. So they go on one specific way. The vise jaws that we make in-house, I call them, that's not one of them. The chance of doing that. The vise jaws that we make in-house, the holes are centered, so they can go either direction. I'll put those out there for you to peruse. Those guys have been run over pretty well. But these are jaws from the manufacturer, so they must go in one way. And it's kind of easy to tell. You can see where we've chowdered them up, and that's going to be the top. So next we need to stone the surfaces that are going to go against the previously stoned surface. So we're staying with that whole principle of foundation. We're starting with good clean surfaces from the bottom up. Next, the socket head cap screws. Go into the counter bores, and since they're half 13, they take a 3/8. Now, I try to keep these ball Allens around just for this purpose, because we can be off center like this to get them all the slack taken up. Now, once you get them in there, switch it around so you can get some leverage and put a little torque on them. Don't leave them loose. Okay, now you're ready to take this thing to the mill and mount it on the mill. And that'll be our next video.